Hello and welcome to this episode of Ebenezer Moment, focusing on my children's book titled Resuscitating Kenya. This book was written in 2010 as a reflection on the post-election violence of 2007 and 2008 in Kenya. This year happens to be the eve of 2027 general elections, exactly 20 years following that difficult incident in the nation of Kenya. I'm reflecting on that incident that occurred at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008, with hopes that we can learn something from history to inform our choices in the present, but also to be prepared in the event that we find ourselves at a brink of a similar incident. Today's topic is Unpacking the Process. Unpacking the process, and I want to start with the collapse or the appearance of the collapse of internal structures. The internal structures that sustain a nation include governance and institutions, economic and physical infrastructure, and the social and cultural fabric. Among them is the civil societies. At the time, some of these structures seemed to have been incapacitated, with members of these structures apparently finding themselves divided between the two sides of the fraction. The civil societies gave their best, and the religious communities took lead while the fighting continued. And it felt like the efforts of the civil society and the efforts of the religious groups and the efforts of the non-governmental organizations and their voices were just drowning in the noise and the fracas of the warring parties. The nation was choking from the violence, from the fights, from the arguments and the quarrels. As such, it seemed like external help was necessary. But that could not have happened unless the nation did a self-assessment, made attempts to stop the fights, to stop the difficulties and the inability of the two political parties to come together. So they reached out. They did the next best thing is to reach out. In page 8 of the book Resuscitating Kenya, I write, the United Nations has a supply of specialists and experts trained to handle different situations at different times. It also has a supply of other resources needed by these experts to handle the situations. The Kenyan nation seemed to be going to a point where it could fail. No one wanted to see that happen. The world was not going to stand by and watch brothers and sisters batter each other. So different societies in Kenya attempted to resolve the crisis, but they did not succeed. The religious communities held prayers pleading for divine intervention. Patriotic and religious songs replaced the normal TV and radio programming, while police and the paramilitary presence in the streets of the country worked fear among the masses. So the civil societies and religious communities finally sought the help, beginning with the help of the African Union of Nations, but also the help of the United Nations. People were desperate for the country to get back to some form of normalcy, for the internal structures to start working again. Institutions, infrastructures, and cultural life seemed to be deteriorating. And that meant that people could not go about their daily responsibilities. Children and students attending school, people managing their tasks or their jobs, or just their needs, day-to-day needs. People could not do that when there was the fear, not knowing what will happen next. So many turned to their spiritual resources. Gathering in places of worship, gathering in places where they practice their spiritual disciplines, not only for safety, not only to worship and to continue with their regular spiritual disciplines, but also for safety. It seemed like the safest place to be was in religious buildings, places of worship, gathering with religious communities. Although there is part of a story that states that in one occasion, the violence got into one of those places of worship, which was unfortunate. Seeking divine intervention and praying for peace and safety is something that is very common in my Christian tradition. And in line with the scriptures, what the Bible teaches in the Christian tradition. So I will read from the book of Psalm 22, verse 28. The lessons that we draw from, the encouragement that we draw, support from in times of crisis. It reads, "For dominion belongs to the Lord. He rules over the nations." In times like this scripture brought so much meaning. Even though there is a leader in this nation, and even though there are leaders in all other nations of the world, and even though we are calling upon neighbors and other nations and African Union to come and help, we are reminded that dominion belongs to the Lord and he rules over the nations. So in my Christian faith, that was an attempt to call upon deity to intervene, the ruler of all the nations, to intervene, to rein in these leaders. People appealed to the higher power. People appealed to God. And for some, this is an interpretation of God intervening by using people who care, people who listen, people who do not want to see this violence deteriorate to what they have experienced in the past. So how did they help? When people hearkened, listened, responded to the call of the nation, how did they respond? We will shed light, beginning with the first individual to arrive. The first individual to arrive is a well-known bishop from a neighboring country in Africa, who arrived immediately, sent himself, heard about the concern, heard about the violence, heard about the incident, and took upon himself to just come because he had handled a similar situation in his own country. So next episode, we'll look at the role that he played, the intervention that he gave, but also we'll look at how he set the stage for the next steps in the process. Thank you for joining us today in this episode. Thank you for checking us out, tuning in to watch this episode. Join us in the next episode, but better yet, engage with us. We want to hear your comments, your feedback, your insight. Join the conversation. The stakes are high. It is our nation. These episodes are not taking a political stance in reflecting on the incident, no, but a cultural identity stance. We are Kenyan. We have a common identity. So join the conversation. We want to hear your comments, your voices, what you think at this time that we are anticipating a general election that's currently seeming to literally divide the country, which tends to happen all the time. But a country that has experienced the worst part of that kind of division is anxious to know, should this continue, what plan do we have in place to ensure that there is no repeat of the 2007-2008 post-election violence. Till then, on behalf of the Ebenezer team, thank you for joining us today. Have a gentle week. Ebenezer.